I recently made a video where I designed, actually I didn't show the design part too much. I just demonstrated the cutting and engraving of a small teacher gift all on my Laguna Laser to try out how well the laser would actually cut through 3/4 inch poplar and provide a quality product. So if you haven't watched that video, you may want to watch that video first. It will demonstrate the laser portion of how I actually engraved the boards. The laser cutting didn't quite turn out as good as I wanted it to, and so I went back to the good old-fashioned way and I cut the boards on my CNC. I cut 3 maple cutting boards on my CNC, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate one, the design of the cutting board and how I went through that step by step, 2, exporting the file of the cutting board as an SVG that I could easily import into the LightBurn software to set up my laser for the etching, the setup of my LightBurn, setup of the SVG in LightBurn to actually do the etching. This should provide an insight into how you can use the 2 tools together. It was a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy the video, and I look forward to any comments that you may provide or insights. With that, let's go ahead and get started into the design part of the video at this time. Create a new file. We're going to make the cutting board. Ultimately, it's going to be, I think 6x9. Let me take a look at my notes. Yep, 6x9. So I'm going to make, I'll start with a board since it's going to be 6x9. I like to have a little bigger board that I'll begin with. I measured it. It's 8 inches right now. So I'll put an 8x14 and I'll 0.75. I'm going off the material surface, and then I'm going to, well, I'm actually going off the material bed. I'm going to leave it the datum point in the lower corner. The material I'm going to use is actually yep, maple, so that works. I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to start the design by first putting on a rectangle, and that rectangle is going to be a 6x9 board, so I just throw something in the middle there, and we'll make this 6. And we'll make this 9. Hit apply. Let's go ahead and center this now. Center that in the material. Close. Now that we have the outside rectangle and it's centered, that's the bounds of the board. The next thing we want to do is put in the handle. So the handle will start with a rectangle. Anchored here. We want it anchored to the top so that I can center it, and when we're all said and done, we want it to be about 3.5 inches. So that'll be about let me go with 2.5 inches for now, because I'm going to put rounded edges on each side. We'll make this 1 inch. We'll hit apply. I'm going to center this handle. I don't know what I did over here. Must have actually hit click. So I'm going to center this handle within from a horizontal standpoint, and then I'm going to take it close and I'm going to move that down 1 inch by using the move tool, relative, -1. So now we've got that centered horizontally inside the board, and I'm going to put the rounded ends on this handle now through using the arc tool. So I'll come over here and use the arc, and so I'm going to go with the center right there, the start there, the finish there. Hit, still got it, so we're going to do it, start over with the snap on, center, start, hit escape, trying to do that over. So now we have that. Let's go ahead and cut the center piece out of both of those. We can see that it didn't quite join there, so we're going to go ahead and take this, and actually we're going to cut this vector node. I'm going to cut it right here. Cut. Down here. Cut. Delete that span of the vector. I'm going to take this vector, and I'm going to join them. Now we have our vectors joined, and that should be a closed vector now. Let's validate. Yep, closed vector. So now we have our handle section, and now we'll put some fillets on the outside of this board to round off the edges. Whoops, hit the wrong button, one too low. I want 1 inch radius for these fillets. Give it a nice rounded look. And we have our board actually designed, and I'm going to use this to export an SVG file that I can burn on my laser. So we're going to import the vectors. So I bought a vector off Etsy. I bought several of them to choose from, so we'll do that at this time. Hit the import vectors, and it's this one right here. Hit open. I'm going to go ahead and center that in the material real quick, and then hit close, and that should work pretty good. I actually don't like it quite all the way up there, so I'm going to lower a little bit, and I'm going to center it with horizontally within the board, but not that way. Oops, Control Z. All right, you know what we got to do is that's not necessarily a group, so we need to group this first. Group it, then select the group, Shift, select the thing I want to center it in, and now we've got it centered. So that's what happens if you have individual vectors that you have to be careful of when you're trying to center them, but that'll work for right now. So I want to put this, let's see, that's already on its own vector, so I'm okay with that. And as far as this is I want to move this to what I call new layer, outside profile. This layer I want to, it's right now on layer 1, and I want to rename that layer to handle. I like to put all my areas on different layers, and this one I'm going to put vector. And I'm going to make that a different color just because I can, and I want to know that it's not going to actually cut, it's a vector. So now I have my board laid out, and the next thing I'm going to want to do is put all of the cuts on it. But I also want to export this to an SVG file. So I want to export this profile to LightBurn, which I can show you later. I'll use to etch the saying in this board. So the first thing I do is I select the whole profile. I'm going to hit File. I'm going to hit Export. I like to export SVGs, and I'm going to take it into my LightBurn folders. Okay, I've now exported that to SVG that I can pull into LightBurn later. Now let's set up the toolpaths for this thing. Set up the toolpaths. We're going to start with, let's start with the handle. So that's a profile cut. I'm going to go to the depth of Z, which cuts through the material. I'm going to select a compression bit that I have from my arsenal. Everything looks good. Hit select. I'm going to cut on the inside. I'll select this with the layer in a minute. I'm going to select on the inside. I don't need a separate last pass. I will need tabs eventually, but I want to preview it first without tabs, so we won't put a tab in there. We don't want a ramp in since we're using a compression bit. I'm going to select close vectors, associate with the toolpath, and I have handle. Hit close. So now that is for sure selected. This will say handle. Calculate. All right. The next one I want to do is actually this outside profile. And select that. 0, this should be Z again. I could leave it at 0.75. I'm going to do it outside. No separate last pass. I will come back and add some tabs, no ramp. And I'm going to select the outside profile, associate with toolpath, hit close, and I want to put that outside profile. Hit calculate. At this time we've got the handle and the outside profile selected. If we wanted to see what that will look like if we just carve the board, we can do a preview all toolpaths, and you can see what the board will look like if we double click on the waste and it goes away. Let's hit reset preview for a second, and let's add one more toolpath only for the purposes of seeing what the text will look like. Even though we're not going to carve it, we're going to use the laser to engrave it. Let's take a look at that. So we're going to add a V bit and go here to 2D view, and we're going to take and I would like this to be a little more in the middle between the handle and the bottom, and let me go ahead and just group that for a second. And then I want to center that inside this area horizontally. All right, now I know that's centered in the horizontal area, and we're going to select vector, associate toolpath, hit close, hit calculate, and I'll just put text, calculate. And I would like, since we're going to laser it brown, let's make that tool color brown. Let's see what that looks like. And now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and preview all toolpaths. And that's what the board should look like when we're done. And we'll apply a round over with my router and it'll look hunky-dory. And so now let's do a real quick addition of tabs so that when we cut this, it cuts the right way. So the next thing we want to do is we want to take the handle and go to 2D view, and everything looks good here still. Ramps. We want to go ahead and add some tabs. I like to make those 0.25 nowadays. That number of tabs looks good. So I'm going to hit calculate. Now what I'm going to do is do the outside profile. I'm going to add tabs. I'll make this 0.25. Actually, on the board, it's going to be pretty narrow on the side, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to move these tabs. And so I'm going to hit Edit Tabs. I'm going to put 2 up at the top, and then 2 on the bottom, versus on the sides, because there won't be much room potentially after I cut the sides. Hit Close, hit Calculate. Let me go back here again, see what happened. Selector, Associate, Automatic Close, there we go. Calculate. Let me check the handle to make sure that didn't go off. Nope, that still said automatic. And text. And reset preview. And then do a quick preview of all visible toolpaths. And you can see our tabs have been added and everything's ready to carve. At this point, we would save these to our USB drive that I use for my Laguna. I probably don't have to go through that in this video. I've done that a number of times. If you have any questions or would like some information on how I actually save out the toolpaths, I would do that simply by coming over here, and I've got my right post processor set up, and since I'm using the same bit, I could just save that out to the toolpath on a USB drive. Note, I would not save the text because that was only for purposes of illustrating what the board will look like. Remember, that's going to be done with the laser. In summary, earlier I exported this file. I exported it to an SVG that I can use on the laser, and I'll show that in a different part of the video, but we're done with the setting up for the carving of the board. At this point in the video, we're going to transition to actually cutting the maple cutting boards. One of the things you will notice is that I had multiple boards to cut, so I had a longer piece of maple, and what I would do is I would move the board down so that the new board could cut at a location higher than the previous board. Simply I tiled, I'll call it, the cutting of the board so I didn't have to modify the file. So the file was set to cut one board instead of all three at one time, and I would simply move the board down. At this point in the video, I'm pointing out how clean the cut was with the compression bit both on the top and on the bottom. That if I had not used a compression bit, it would not be nearly as clean. It really was nice not to have any tear out, which makes the round over and sanding quite nice. At this point in the video, we'll do a quick demo of importing the SVG file that I saved previously into LightBurn and setting that up to actually engrave on these maple cutting boards, and do a little quick view of cutting the engraving on the boards. But you've already seen that actually in the other video if you watched it. As you can see, I've already opened up LightBurn, and I had previously exported that cutting board file as an SVG, so what we're going to do is we're going to open up, we're going to import an SVG. I'd saved it in my LightBurn support folder. I come down and I see the teacher cutting board SVG. I select that and I open it up. It's now in LightBurn with its own individual layers. Remember, we saved it in layers at the time, and we'd actually saved the layers for the handle and the outside profile. It was before I separated all the layers. They were one layer by themselves, and the actual saying was another. We can see that the size of this board is 6x9, so it imported exactly with the size that they ended up cutting with the maple cutting boards. So everything is aligned with how the board has been physically cut. Now all we need to do is align this logo or set up the board so we can put this logo on there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to take these two. I'm going to select these two vectors, and I'm going to move them to a tool layer, and so that I can do proper framing. And then I'm going to actually take and not make them part of the frame. So now I have this all set up to either export, save as an RD file that I can put into my laser, or to send directly to my laser, and I can frame it and locate it in the exact spot on the board that I want to. In part one of this two-part video series, I demonstrated a lot more on the laser, on the actual engraving and cutting of the poplar laser board. The actual engraving of the maple cutting boards was very similar. Once I had the boards already cut, I just aligned them in some guidelines that I put on the laser board, and I engraved them, and so there's probably nothing to actually show worth showing. So with that, I'm not going to add extra time to this video to demonstrate me engraving the hard maple boards, but what I will do is show you the excellent, what I think is an excellent result of engraving on the pre-cut boards. I was very pleased with the end result of these. I finished them with some Odie's oil. The teachers really enjoyed them, and I was very happy with how these came out as compared to trying to do the whole job cutting and engraving on the laser. It's going to be a great combination having my CNC to do the cutting, nice clean cutting, and then the laser to do the engraving. I did do roundovers with my router using a quarter roundover, and I could have done that on the CNC, but I was actually in a hurry and didn't want to take the time to do all of the alignment steps necessary to make sure those roundovers would work perfect. So I hope you enjoyed this project. I'll bring you more combination projects in the future. In summary, what we did was a quick design of a small cutting board or a small breadboard or cheese board, whatever you want to call it. We designed that in the Vectric software. I then took the information from the Vectric software, exported it as an SVG so that I could import it into my LightBurn software to set up the engraving of my cutting board. It was a lot of fun. I learned a few tricks here and there, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you would like, share, comment, or subscribe to the channel so you can see future videos. With that, have a terrific day, and I look forward to any comments. As I have done with some of my other videos, if you would like a copy of the cutting board file, the Vectric vCarve profile, or the SVG, I would be willing to give you SVG minus the actual saying or text. I can't provide that legally because I purchased that off Etsy. I'll put a link in the description where you can find that same SVG file, the saying, in Etsy if you would like to go purchase it yourself. It's $1 or $2. It's not very much. So for that reason, send me an email if you would like the CRV file, the Vectric file, minus the saying port. It's pretty simple and straightforward, but sometimes people like to have those files easy. Just send me an email, and you can get my email by simply going to the About section on my YouTube channel and clicking on the email address, and it is generationscustomcreations@gmail.com. generationscustomcreations@gmail.com.